And so we felt it was very important to bring it to you guys. So I will just turn it over to Allison. The training will be recorded. So if your colleagues missed today's training, they can always go to our CoC website, which will give you guys information on how to access it towards the end of the training. But I'm going to turn it over to Allison now. Just a reminder, please private chat me your name and organization. If you can't chat, you can always email me at cqw1@westchestergov.com. And I think Allison might have, yep, she has that up on the screen. So, thank you guys. Allison, all yours.
Thank you. So welcome back, everyone, for our second installment of our 2021 Leveling Up trainings, where we're going to learn how to better interact with different populations that we serve. I just want to remind you of our Zoom etiquette. So this session is going to be recorded. We are not going to record the question and answer session at the end so that everyone can feel free to speak and ask questions about things that you may feel are sensitive. So just to let you know that we want the content to be available to our colleagues. We may not want all of our questions to be available at the end to our colleagues. So please keep that in mind. Also, I'm still letting people into the room while I'm talking. Zoom etiquette, please mute your line when you are not the speaker. Everyone's been automatically muted as they entered, and we would like to reduce any background noise so that we can not only have a great experience on the Zoom, but also so that we don't have, we can have a nice clean recording as well. Attendance, if you have to leave and come back, that's totally cool. Please feel free to leave and come back. If you need to, if you have an emergency, we understand, just hit us up in the chat. Craig is taking attendance today. You can private chat him your name and organization, or you can send it to him via email. That's just going to be on the screen for the next couple of seconds, because right now I am going to change gears and introduce our presenter today, Shepard Verbus from the Loft LGBTQ plus Community Center here in White Plains, who in addition to being our expert on engaging with the LGBTQ plus community, runs an awful lot of programs and does direct care for folks in our community, just like so many of you do. So Shepard, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much. Okay, hi everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. First and foremost, it's very lovely to virtually meet you all. My name is Shepard. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. Pronouns are the words that replace my name in a sentence. So when referring to me, you would use, oh, Shepard, they were so, they were so great, 10 out of 10 would recommend on Yelp. That's what you're going to say when I leave, right? But yeah, so we are here today to talk about LGBTQ plus access to housing, resources. We're going to talk about allyship, and I'm going to be sharing my screen. So I want to make sure that you all see this. And I got rid of my Zoom somehow. Okay, here we go. Cool. All right, give me a thumbs up if you see this. Yes, excellent. Cool. Keep your thumbs in the air if you see this. Yes, lovely. Thanks so much, Allison. Okay, so I do invite you to be on camera. That's your personal choice. I would love to see your faces. But if you don't want to be on camera, that's totally fine. We are going to be taking the next kind of like, I would say 45 minutes or so, to unpack the content. And then I'm gonna be passing the mic over back to Allison, who's gonna go over the kind of like legal side of this, and then we're gonna open it up for questions, okay? So one thing I'm gonna invite you to do while we get started is, if you don't already have something nearby, pull out like a notebook and a pen, write down whatever question pops into your head as we go through these slides so that you don't forget it later, so that we can have a discussion about the things that are really impacting your work, the work that you do every day, that you really want answered, okay? The reason that we're here today is to answer those questions, okay? So it's very important. We're not here today to just talk into the ether. We are here today to make sure that whatever you came with on your mind gets answered to the best of our ability, okay? So as we dive in, I'm gonna make a disclaimer before I get started. We are here today to talk about LGBTQ+ experiences, people, identity, things like that. So I always want to make sure that I center the fact that I am not a complete representation of the community. I am one person with one voice, and I work at an LGBT center and am an expert, I would say, in LGBTQ+ community issues and navigating LGBTQ+ community issues and things like that. But if you are somebody with real life lived experience, or somebody who is an ally, I invite you to type in anytime you hear something that you'd like to chime in on, right, into the chat. You say, hey, you know, I heard this before, what do you think of that? Or, hey, you know, from my experience, this thing doesn't sit well with me, or something like that, right? Okay, this is a conversation as much as possible. Or write it down in your notebook, and we'll address it in the questions, okay? Cool, nice, love that. Okay. So serving LGBTQ+ people experiencing homelessness. Let's get started. First of all, who are we and where are we from? My name is Shepherd. I'm from the Loft LGBTQ+ Community Center. We are located in White Plains, and we were founded in 1983. It is super important to kind of remember where our organization came from, which is why these photos are here, and also remember why we were started. The Loft was founded in 1983 in response to the AIDS pandemic that was like completely devastating our community. There were no resources at all in our local area that helped LGBTQ+ people through coming out, navigating family issues, accessing care around the virus. So we were actually formed as a helpline. That's our oldest existing service that still exists today is our helpline program. We are now a fully fledged LGBT center. Again, right here in White Plains, we serve all of Westchester County and the surrounding areas. We actually have programs that span, a program that spans the entire mid-Hudson Valley region. We are a center for LGBTQ+ community members ages 18 and older. And I'm saying that with a caveat because we do also have family services. So, you know, if you know an LGBTQ+ person that can benefit from support, we are the people to call. We have support groups, we have social groups and activities, which are gatherings for LGBTQ+ people and allies around a hobby or an interest area. We have assistance and advocacy programs, including our helpline, which is still up and running today. Our helpline is a really great resource for the community if you know anybody who needs LGBT affirming legal providers, medical providers, access, you know, we hope to add you to the helpline, right? So access to emergency care, things like that. They can call our center and we can make sure that we connect them to somebody who we know from our experience in the community and from the community members that we work with telling us that they're LGBT affirming, that the person that we're speaking to gets connected to somebody who's going to be an ally to them. Health and wellness programs, including Westchester County's only LGBT senior program called Silver Connections for LGBT people 55 and older. When we talk about LGBT people, I really want us to expand kind of our idea that, you know, there is this sort of notion that all LGBT people are young, right? That they're all like teenagers coming out, and that's real and valid, and there are plenty of queer teenagers, but LGBT people do not stop existing at a certain age, right? So just inviting us into that mindset that yes, there are LGBT seniors, and yes, we do serve them. Education, including trainings like this and special events, including Westchester County Pride, and an event called the Hudson Valley Trans Forum, which is a 2-day conference entirely focused on serving and empowering trans, gender nonconforming, and non-binary community members. I can put that info into the chat later, but this is our website and our information. And that'll be at the bottom of each of our each of the screens. So here's a little bit about what we're doing today. We're going to talk about, some context, introduction to allyship. We're going to talk about identities, understanding language and why language is important, unpacking the difference between gender, sex expression, and sexuality, pronouns, asking and respecting. We're probably going to spend a little bit of time on that, actually. So if that's something that's intriguing to you, please listen up then. And then we're going to go over the guidelines and do the Q&A. When we're doing Q&A, please feel free to ask your questions, okay? Like I said, write them down, ask, but ask respectfully. And we'll talk about how to ask a question respectfully, right? So just like, just keep that in mind, that we are all here to learn. So there is really no wrong question to ask, as long as we do so with respect. Housing for LGBTQ, like in Sage, New York City. Yes. So there's the question in the chat right now that says housing for LGBTQ like Sage in New York City. Sage is an LGBTQ senior resource that is based in New York City. There's no Sage chapter here. We would be kind of the equivalent. Sage does have LGBTQ senior housing. Westchester County does not currently. Not currently, okay? So if you have questions about that or anything like that, you can reach out to us at the Loft, but we can connect people to housing resources that exist. So that's a great question. Okay, so setting the stage, talking about context, introduction to allyship. Sometimes when we dive in and we kind of introduce the notion of allyship, there's a lot of misconceptions like, hey, I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. I don't want to offend somebody. So, what normally happens is if you don't want to offend somebody, no shade, sometimes people just don't start, right? So I'm going to invite you. It takes 21 days to create a new habit, right? That's the going rate, 21 days to create a new habit. 21 days from today is Monday, October 18th. Okay, is that a special day for anybody? October 18th, anybody got a birthday on October 18th? We're gonna celebrate it with you by creating a new habit, okay? When we go through this next slides and we talk about allyship, I want you to point in your kind of reflection, I want us to kind of consider one thing that we can do, one new thing that we can do as an ally to the LGBTQ+ community that we're not already doing. Okay, and then I invite you to take the challenge to make that a habit. And by Monday, October 18th, it should be in there, should be second nature. Okay, I have been saying LGBT quite a bit. And sometimes when I say it really quickly and it gets jumbled and people don't always know what I'm talking about, and that's fine. Sometimes they think I'm talking about a sandwich, like a BLT or something like that. I am not. I'm talking about a community of people, LGBT or LGBTQ or LGBTQ+, or LGBTQIA2PD, so on and so forth. What I mean by that is lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans or transgender, queer or questioning, okay? That acronym does continue. There are an infinite number of identities that can fall underneath this acronym. When we're talking, I'm probably gonna be using LGBTQ, But it's also okay to just say LGBT. It's okay to say LGBTQ+, okay? As long as you're keeping those letters, right? It's important to have those base letters. It's great to have the plus. T, G, and C, and B. This is a newer kind of acronym. Not many people know of it. We like to use it and normalize it because it really does break out the, the gender component of kind of the LGBT umbrella spectrum. So T, G, and C, and B is another acronym I might be using throughout this workshop. So that stands for transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary. Okay, and I'm going to talk about gender in a few slides. So don't worry about what they mean. Just know that if I say T, G, and C, and B, I'm talking about the trans community. I'm talking about people who are gender expansive in some way. Transgender, gender nonconforming, and non-binary. Cisgender. Cisgender is a word that is very important to know. Okay, all of these are very important words. Does anybody know what cisgender means? Type into the chat. An educated guess what cisgender means. Step number one to being an ally is understanding that everybody gets a label. Okay, I love that. Thank you so much. Cool. Okay, great. Oh, I love this. Yes. Okay, somebody got it. Somebody got it. Okay. So cisgender. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for giving your thoughts in the chat. Cisgender is any person who doesn't identify as a member of the T, G, and C, and B community. Okay. So essentially, you could be like, think of like Oprah, right? Like you get a car, you get a car, you get a car. Nobody doesn't get a label, right? Everybody gets a label. Okay. So cisgender explains is a label for somebody whose gender identity and the sex they were assigned at birth align, right? They match. Okay, so a person who is not trans, right? So you can be a cisgender woman if you were born and the doctor said it's a girl and you now identify as a woman, right? You would be a cisgender woman. You could be a cisgender man, right? Same thing as if you're a trans woman or a trans man, right? It's just an adjective to place in front of your gender, right? Okay, so cisgender can be shortened to cis, C-I-S. Transgender can be shortened to trans, and we understand that it means the same thing. Cool. Yes, thank you so much. All right, a little bit of context. Why this is important. LGBTQ plus people bend, I say bend or break, I really say break, societal expectations of gender and sex norms, right? The kind of norms that we grow up internalizing, saying like, you know, if you're a man, right, what are some gender norms around people who are men or masculinity, right? Somebody lists some in the chat. What are some gender expectations for men in our society? I can name one, right? A gender expectation, yes, tough, must work, strong, they like sports. Oh, that's one, yes, that's definitely one, thank you. Yeah, the expectation also, in addition, don't cry, is also that all men are attracted to women, right? That's a gender expectation. That's an expectation based on gender, right? That all men are attracted to women and that's the norm, right? And conversely, if you will, you know, that all women are attracted to men and that's the norm, right? So if we're talking about LGBTQ plus people, we're talking about a community of people, whether they're lesbian, whether they're gay, whether they're bisexual, whether they're trans, a community of people who are going against these norms, so to speak, right? Who are not finding attraction the way that society says they should, who are not aligning with their bodies or with their identities the way that society says they should, right? And living in a world that says that you're wrong constantly is a a really big reason why a lot of LGBTQ people face higher risk for discrimination, violence, isolation, rejection, fear of accessing resources, and you know, everything else, right? And also why it's important to be centering this in the work that you're all doing, right? Also, when we're thinking of LGBTQ plus identity, one of the things I hear is, oh, I don't serve LGBTQ people. I don't have clients that are LGBT, right? Because kind of this like assumption is that all LGBTQ plus people are walking around with like a flag on their back, right? Like a cape, like a rainbow cape, like one I wish I had right now, right? That we're all kind of like screaming from the rooftops that we're gay, that we're queer, that I'm like, you know, walking around the street saying, I'm trans, everybody, you know, we don't do that, right? Oftentimes, you know, there are some times I'm saying sometimes LGBTQ plus people live in this invisibility, right? Live in a world that doesn't see them because the world that exists currently is a world that normalizes not being LGBT, that says everybody isn't LGBT unless proven otherwise, right? You have to come out, you have to prove it to me, right? And what we want to do as allies is say, you don't have to prove anything to me. I'm not going to assume. I am not going to assume. I'm not going to automatically think every client that walks in my door is straight. I'm not going to automatically think that every client that walks in my door is cisgender. I'm not going to automatically think that, right? Because I know that LGBTQ plus people may or may not come out to me, but it doesn't mean that I'm not serving them. And also, LGBTQ plus people are not a monolith. Nobody is, right? Just like everybody else. So we all, LGBTQ plus identities are found in every single demographic, right? BIPOC, immigrant, survivor, neurodiversity, obviously also have ranges of physical ability, belong to religious and cultural belief systems, and also Catholic. I mean, the way that I'm phrasing this makes it seem like LGBTQ plus people are not Catholic. That was not the point I'm making. No, but we exist in all religions, socioeconomic statuses, races, ethnicities, ages, ability levels, and are navigating those things on top of being LGBT, right? Okay, so being LGBT is just another thing that we're navigating. So being LGBT might not be the first thing on somebody's mind, right? Maybe the first thing when they're coming to you for resources is, I need to flee an abusive relationship. The first thing is that, right? You don't need to know I'm bi. You don't need to know, right? Maybe I don't tell you because I feel like I want to keep that for me because I don't know how you're going to respond, right? Which is why in an allyship situation, it's important to have visual cues of allyship, maybe like a rainbow somewhere, your pronouns displayed, right? So the words that you use to replace your name in a sentence, things like that, that give off visual cues, very easy to do, that say, this is a safe space. Maybe your intake form, if you have one, has a space for somebody's chosen name on it, somebody's pronouns on it, a place for them to disclose if they're like what their sexual orientation is, what their gender identity is, right? Because it's not always the case that somebody's going to come to you and be like, hey, listen, I'm gay, okay? But we also want to make sure that even if they don't say that, we are knowing that they very well could be. So we've been talking a lot about allyship, so I decided to define it. Essentially, obviously, it's the state or condition of being an ally, supportive association with another person or group, such association with members of marginalized or mistreated group to which one does not belong, right? You can be an ally to any community, any marginalized community, right? Of course, we're talking about LGBTQ plus allyship. Words associated with this that I want to pin in our brains for a sec, active and passive allyship, right? So active allyship is the one I invite us to step into. Passive allyship is a form of allyship that I don't fully consider actual allyship. Is kind of like that allyship that's like, yeah, no, I'm an ally to LGBTQ plus people. And then somebody says something discriminatory, or somebody misgenders somebody and uses the incorrect pronouns for somebody next to you, and you don't say something, right? That's a passive ally. That's an ally that's not actually an ally, because an ally is a verb. Ally is a verb, okay? It's a living, breathing word that you need to embody, right? It is not something that we just put that rainbow somewhere in our office and say, hey, listen, I'm an ally now because I have this cute little rainbow. No, right? Ally is a verb. Here are some ways that allyship can be enacted. Through listening, right? Through listening. Seems easy. Through empathy, right? Understanding that maybe your experiences, your experience might not be the same, but I'm sure we have all lived in a closet. We have all experienced a secret that we've had to keep. We have all faced some form of oppression. We have all, right? And maybe it doesn't look exactly the same, but at the end of the day, we can all empathize, right? I mean, I bet you're great at it, judging by the profession you chose. So listening, empathy. Listening is key though. Active listening, really. Critical thinking, okay? This kind of speaks to addressing our bias, maybe, maybe you were taught something that you need to unlearn, right? That's for you to know. Maybe, you have this like preconceived notion of the LGBTQ community because the only exposure to the LGBTQ community you have are from horror movies, right? That say that we're always the villain, or are from pictures of like New York City Pride, and you're like not into that or whatever. And I'm like, why not? But anyway, critical thinking, right? Unpacking those biases that you might be holding. Understanding why people at Pride are expressing themselves that way, right? Understanding it, kind of going back and doing some research on why that kind of expression is very important. Using your voice, right? So if you are next to somebody who is misgendering somebody else, saying, actually, this person doesn't use those pronouns. Shepherd uses they, them pronouns, right? Saying that's an ally. That's an ally. Showing respect, right? So, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. And practice, okay? So nobody's perfect right away. Nobody's perfect right away in anything in life. I mean, maybe you're just great at everything, but most people aren't great at every single thing that they do right away. Practice is key. Practice reinforces all of the other ways that you can be an ally, right? Because the LGBT community is always changing, right? It is always changing. The language is always changing. The factors that are important are always changing, right? It's not stagnant. So here are some questions to consider as we continue to move forward. What are some thoughts or feelings that come up for me when I learn about LGBTQ plus identities or current events or things like that, right? In unpacking my bias, right? In going back and thinking about my critical thinking of the bias I might be carrying with me. What are thoughts or feelings that come up for me? The second question is, what are thoughts or feelings that come up for me when I meet a new LGBTQ plus person, or when someone shares their LGBTQ plus identity with me? Have I ever in the back of my head heard about somebody on TV who's non-binary or trans and thought, why? Why are you doing that? Why? Right? Have I ever had that thought? And if you have, understanding why that's harmful, right? Understanding how we can step away from thoughts like that, how we can put them in our past, and we can say, I don't know exactly why somebody identifies the way they do, but I understand the need. I get it, right? So those are questions to take with us. Are we all good? Loving life? Cool, great, thank you. Okay, so part 2, navigating identities. We are gonna spend a little bit of time here, okay? So we're gonna kind of unpack the implication of language, like we said. We're also gonna be unpacking the difference between gender, sex, gender expression, and sexuality, and talk about pronouns. So as we move forward, just kind of noting, right? Language comes up often when we talk about LGBTQ plus allyship, right? About being an ally for the LGBTQ plus community, because it's often the first thing that we can do, right? And what I mean by this is not that you need to become an encyclopedia, okay? You don't need to be the dictionary. You don't need to know everything, right? Because nobody does, okay? If somebody ever trusts you enough to come out to you, which is a sacred thing and is an honor, if somebody ever trusts you enough to disclose an LGBT identity to you, the best thing that you can do is say, what does this mean to you? Okay. What you don't do is say, oh my gosh, I met this non-binary person. And yeah, no, just like you. They're just like you. You know, maybe you would get along. Maybe have you met, you know? Or say, oh yeah, I know exactly what a demi-girl lesbian is. So let me make sure that I, you know, like, let me tell you about that, right? We don't want to do that, right? Because everybody's identity is unique and everybody has a different feeling around a term that they might use, right? So kind of centering the understanding that language, we can either use it as human beings as a tool of oppression, right? We could say, I'm not going to respect this label for you. I'm not going to respect these pronouns for you. I am not going to see you the way that you want me to see you, the way that you are. Or we could use it as a tool for empowerment, right? We could say, yeah, of course, I see you. What does this mean to you? How can I best support you, right? Remembering that at the end of the day, LGBTQ plus people, if they haven't heard these things that are about to pop up on the screen, they have been socialized in a world that has normalized these things, right? So thinking that LGBTQ plus identities are a pathology, that you're an abomination, that you're immoral or sinful, your family expectation, putting words on you, stereotyping you in some way, and then kind of being like, why is everything that I stand for? Why is who I am wrong, right? So thinking of who creates the words that we use to talk about ourselves, right? Who creates them and why they were created, right? Because that's a whole other workshop that we could get into. But also what impact that language has had on the LGBTQ plus community, right? So what impact words like this have had on the LGBT community, positive, negative, and things like that. And how can I do my best as an ally to uplift, right, to use for empowerment. So I'm going to go brief over two fundamental components of the next few slides that we're going to be talking about, gender and sexuality. So this is the one about gender. So gender, the behavioral, cultural, or psychological traits typically associated with one sex. That's a Merriam-Webster dictionary version of gender. But I'm going to explain it a different way. But either way, here we go. So here's a few myths about gender I'm going to put on the screen. Myth number one is that gender is determined by one's biological sex characteristics. So that means that somebody's body determines somebody's gender. That is a myth. In reality, gender is a personal identity. Gender does not automatically exist due to somebody's biology. In other words, somebody's body does not determine their gender. And I'll break that down further in a second. Myth number two, gender is the same throughout a person's life. If they're a girl as a kid, they will be a woman as an adult. The reality is gender is fluid and we all have freedom to explore it at our own rate. Myth number three, and everybody is. Every single human being has gender. Everybody, right? If you're a man, that's your gender. If you were assigned male at birth, then you're a cis man and that's your gender, right? The kind of assumption is that only LGBT people experience gender and sexuality. Everybody does. Everybody does on some scale. Myth number three, if you're really trans, quote unquote, you know this at a young age. Reality is that many trans people don't know that they're trans at a young age. Many people do, but not everybody is the reality. Myth number 4, a person's pronouns always indicate their gender. And reality number 4 is pronouns are a great form of expression, but do not always reflect a person's gender identity. So, and I'll get in on that in a second. So for instance, you don't know whether somebody is trans or somebody is non-binary if they use she, her pronouns. Okay, that's what I mean. It really is a great form of expression, but it's not always everything about a person. And it's important. How was it determined that the dictionary definition of gender is a myth? Well, we'll talk about gender a little bit more in a second. So I'm not sure if I understand the question. So here's a few myths and realities about sexuality. A person's sexual orientation is the result of negative sexual experience in their past. We have heard this before, that a lesbian experienced some sexual trauma, and that is the reason that she's gay or whatever. That's not true. That's a myth. Sexual attraction is innate, does not automatically change due to past negative sexual experiences. Sexuality is the same throughout a person's life. Same thing with before. Sexuality is fluid, and we all explore it at our own rate. Myth number 3, all gay people are femme, all lesbian people are butch. And this is a binary way of thinking. We're not even talking about bi people in this myth. That's not true either. LGBT people are not a stereotype. They do not all fit one way or another based on the way that media has represented our community in the past. Although if they do fit that stereotype, that's valid too, so that's fine. Myth number 4, bisexuality and pansexuality are just ways to say that a person is promiscuous, right? Bisexuality and pansexuality being a person who is attracted to more than one gender in a nutshell. So the reality is that bi and pan people and non-monosexual people, which is a fun way of saying people who are attracted to more than one gender, are not attracted to everyone they see, right? It's not like that. Just like anybody else, you have your own standards and things you find attractive in humans, and doesn't mean that you just see people and think everybody is your type. Okay, so again, we're going to dive deeper. So sex assigned at birth. This is a great kind of like little breakdown that we're going to go through. This is the gender unicorn. You can Google this. It's not a loft graphic. It was created by Trans Student Educational Resources. You can literally Google the gender unicorn. You can find it in a coloring sheet if you're so inclined. I do love a good coloring sheet. But yeah, you can have it for yourself. But it is a good way to kind of understand the differences of the things that we're talking about now. So first one we're going to talk about is sex assigned at birth. You'll see that it's circled on this gender unicorn. This is biology, right? It's what a lot of people assume to be gender, but is really sex. It's anatomy, okay? So it's a person's physical anatomy. Sex is not the same thing as gender. Gender identity is what's circled now, this rainbow, right? So gender identity is how a person thinks, how they feel, how they perceive themselves in relation to the world they live in, okay? Gender identity is internal. Nobody knows somebody's gender identity other than the person, right? You know your gender, right? You can tell me your gender and then I'll know it too, but I don't know your feelings about it. I don't know exactly where you fall on these lines, right? Your gender is yours. Your body does not determine your gender. Gender expression or presentation is how somebody looks, okay? So this is how a person expresses themselves. How you present your gender to others, how people perceive you based on your external cues, maybe your hair, right? Traditionally in our society, having longer hair is more feminine, right? Maybe, you don't wear makeup, that's more masculine in our society, things like that, right? So in addition, gender expression is not only your clothing, It is also the way that you walk. It's the way that you talk. It's your name. Your name can be a form of gender expression. It's your pronouns can be a form of gender expression, and a way that you're expressing who you are, right, to other people around you, okay? So we all know plenty of, for example, women, right, who have a masculine gender expression, right? So go with me on this, right? A woman who only never wears makeup, only wears like football jerseys and loves like kind of like sports and things like that. All of the things that we would say are traditionally masculine, right, in society. And we can look at that person and say, you're still a woman, right? Your expression, the fact that you never wear makeup and only wear football jerseys, does not take away from the fact that you're a woman because you say you are, right? So this is what I mean by somebody's expression. Somebody's external is not always who they are on the inside, okay? It doesn't always, our assumption of what this must equal isn't always the case. Because everybody, I mean, has the freedom to express themselves however they like, and not everybody has access to a form of expression that feels validating to them, right? Or maybe somebody's altering the way that they look to access the resources that you provide because they don't want to be discriminated against, right? Maybe, you know, somebody, a woman is making themselves more feminine, right? To access your resources because they don't want to be categorized a certain way, right? And that's very valid. That happens, right? So what we want to understand as an ally is that you can't judge a book by its cover, right? Based on somebody's outward appearance does not always indicate how they identify. Okay, I know. As in, okay, we're gonna get to that question in a sec. The other thing that we're gonna talk about briefly is sexual and romantic attraction. I'm saying briefly because I want to just point to the fact that not everybody experiences sexual attraction in the same rate, right? Our kind of like society and media has said, has hypersexualized everybody, right? I mean, gay, straight, whatever. There's this hyper focus on sexual activity and that's like everybody's ultimate goal. And that there is a range of people who experience different degrees of sexuality, sexual attraction, right? And there's also I invite all of us to kind of think of this. There's also people that we feel romantically or emotionally attracted to who may be different than people that we feel sexually attracted to, right? And that's another another way that people express themselves too is through labels that might identify them through a sexual attraction or through a romantic attraction. We're not getting into terms, so to speak, because it is too much. It's too much and we cannot possibly cover everything. So we're not going to get into words, but if you have questions about words, we can get into that in a bit. So kind of the, during the question and answer. So there is kind of a misconception when we're talking about the trans community specifically, that being trans equals a certain thing, like you're transitioning from point A to point B, and that if you're assigned male at birth and you identify as a woman, right, that you're going to want to do all of these things that are listed on this screen, right? You're going to want to take hormones. You're going to want to socially transition and come out. You're going to want to legally transition and change your identity documents and change your name legally and your gender legally. You're going to want medical and surgical intervention, right? There's an assumption that that is always the goal, right? And that is not true, okay? Just like everybody, trans people have a complex relationship to their bodies too, right? Not everybody needs every single thing, right? And also there are other ways to be trans than transitioning from point A to point B, right? It's not always that's called a binary way of thinking, right? So a binary being you're either man or woman, female or male, right? And inviting us to kind of unpack that and understand that not everybody fits into those two categories. So there is kind of an assumption that all trans people follow the same path. So what this screen shows is that there are several paths for people to take, and you can take all of them or none of them and still be trans, right? So social transition would include coming out. It would include cutting your hair or growing it. It would include changing your clothing. Anything in your social circle that indicates a different gender expression. Or hormonal transition, so taking hormone replacement therapy, estrogen or testosterone, blockers, things like that. A legal transition, which would be a legal name or gender change or both, and medical and surgical transition, which is kind of like what everybody automatically thinks. So again, a trans person can do all of these things, or a trans person can do none of them. Or one of them or two of them, but you don't have to do anything really to be trans, right? You just can be trans and never change your name, right? You can be trans and be a trans woman and still use he, him pronouns, okay? It just has to make sense for you. I'm gonna get past this one. Okay. I'm gonna talk quick about pronouns. And then I'm going to pass the mic over to Allison for the HUD guidelines, and then we're going to do Q&A, and I do see some questions. Cool. Okay, so unpacking pronouns quickly. Here's a screen with a few examples. Pronouns are, again, the word that replaces your name in a sentence. Common pronouns are he or she, right? Common pronouns. We have all heard them. We all use them. Those are pronouns. Okay, he felt happy for himself after getting his promotion. She felt happy for herself after getting her promotion. It is recognized in the dictionary that singular use of they, them is correct, okay? I believe it was like the 2020 word of the year or something like that, maybe 2019 even. They, them, theirs is the most common gender neutral pronoun that you probably will come across, okay? So a person, one singular human being who uses they, them, a sentence would look like, they felt happy for themselves after getting their promotion, okay? Easy. We do it all the time, really. I mean, using they, them in a sentence. Somebody parked their car out front. They have to move it or else they're gonna get a ticket. I know that car belongs to one human being, right? I know it's not a clown car. I know that there's not like, 15 drivers. Okay, they need to move their car. That's an example of using they, them for a singular human. Z, zir is the next one. Z, here is the one after, and z, them is the third one. These are examples of neo pronouns, neo, N-E-O. And these are common ones, but I'm not going to complicate things. I do invite you to practice, pronoun use like this on your own. The thing is that there is an infinite amount of pronouns, specifically neopronouns, an infinite amount, like literally infinite. So these are just 3 examples. And it is important to validate somebody's pronouns because as an ally, it's one of the first things that you can do to prove that you're an actual ally, first of all. But it's also very important when we're talking about access to resources. If a person is reaching out to you and needing support, right? And in a state of crisis, really, the last thing that they need is to be re-traumatized. The last thing that they need is for this wall to come up that says, I don't actually see you. I don't actually care. I don't care. That's what it says. So one of the easiest things that we can do is practice pronouns. As a takeaway tip, what we recommend doing is using they, them for everybody until you learn somebody's actual pronouns, right? So, oh, that's a great question. I love that. Thank you. We'll get to that question. What's the origin of the pronoun beyond he, she, and they? The origin, I mean, to answer, I mean, quickly, neopronouns beyond he, she, or they, so additional pronoun examples, are words that are created by and for the community, right? So it's kind of that argument that I won't use they, them pronouns, like somebody saying this like in your ear, I'm not going to use they, them, it's plural, it's not grammatically correct, right? Blah, 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 right? And so then somebody's saying, okay, well then I'm going to make a word. You're going to use that then, right? Okay, so we can think of it that way. Words are always created. There's a million, words created every day, right? And the way that we use words changes all the time and things like that. So that's a quick answer to that, like how it was originated. Here are examples that we're gonna skip, but I want to get this before passing the mic. So another thing that comes up often is I don't know how to ask somebody's pronouns, right? I want to, I'm here, I want to be respectful, but I don't know how. Okay, here's an example of a scenario that might be something that you've experienced yourself. Okay, so what I'm going to do is say, hi, my name is Sam. My name is not Sam. Hi, my name is Sam. I use she, her pronouns. How should I refer to you? Just meeting a person. That's how I'm going to do it. Hi, my name is Sam. I use she, her pronouns. How should I refer to you? Okay, what pronouns do you use? Easy. Okay, cool. Thanks, Sam. Hi, Sam. I'm Jake. My pronouns are they, them. Beautiful. We love it. We love to see it. This is the most ideal way this person can respond, right? They say their name, they're friendly, they give their pronouns. All right, here we go again. Hi, my name is Sam. I use she, her pronouns. How should I refer to you? That's what you're saying, right? And then Jake says, hi, Sam, I'm Jake. The end. Doesn't share their pronouns, right? So Sam is thinking, maybe they didn't hear. Maybe they didn't hear me. Maybe I'll rephrase. Or, you're judging this situation, right? This is a human interaction, right? You might be in a hallway somewhere. Maybe they don't want to share. Okay. Maybe they don't want to share. I'll ask again later. For now, I'm going to use gender neutral. Okay. For now, because Jake hasn't shared and because this is not the appropriate time to re-ask the question, I'm going to use they, them because that's safe. Okay. My name is Sam. I use she, her pronouns. How should I refer to you? Hi, Sam. I'm Jake. Why are you asking our pronouns? This is Jake with a little attitude, right? This is Jake being a little bit like, I'm not here for you. I'm not going to do this with you. So then what do you say to Jake? You say, I don't like to make assumptions, Jake. We ask this question to everyone. And the truth is, you need to do that, okay? Because we're not just asking Jake their pronouns because they're gender non-conforming in some way, right? We're not just asking Jake based on our assumptions that Jake might be a part of the community. We're asking Jake because we ask everybody. We ask everybody because we know that we can't judge a book by their cover, okay? So say something like, I don't like to make assumptions. We ask this question to everyone. The best thing to do is share your own pronouns first. If you feel comfortable, not everybody does, and that's okay. That's something to unpack, and that's a separate conversation, right? Ask, how should I refer to you? What pronouns can I use for you? Reminder, we can't know somebody's pronouns based on their outside appearance. That's the end of my content. So here's again our information, the Loft LGBTQ+ Community Center. If you have specific questions for me that we don't get to answer later, my email is here also, and I'll type it into the chat. Okay.
Hi again, everybody. Okay, so now we're, going to move away from Shepard's engaging content into some really dry HUD stuff, which I'll try to keep less dry for you folks. Before I move to that, I do want to offer two things. One is words of wisdom from my MSW professor on the first day of class. And what she said was, you can be as judgy as you want. You can't bring that to work. So whether or not what has been said today resonates with you, you have an obligation as a provider to provide the same level of care for everyone. And I know that you know that. So the other thing I'm going to offer is a valuable service. And that is, we didn't get into the terminology today of all the different ways that people identify. And I want you to know, if someone comes to you with an identity and you don't understand the term, or you want to know more about it and you want to know how to get started, or you just need someone to talk to about how it made, what came up for you when you had that encounter, you can call or email me anytime, and I will be there for you on that. You say, oh, this person came in today and they said that they have they, them pronouns, they're non-binary, and they're bi-romantic. Like, I don't even know what's going on right now. Can you please break this down for me? Yes, 100%. I will absolutely be there for you and break it down for you. So definitely bring that to my door. And now we'll head back to our PowerPoint slide. Craig asked me to give a plug that if you haven't already, hit him up with your name and organization name for the purposes of attendance. If you please would, his email is cqw1@westchestergov.org if you can't access the chat, but hopefully everyone has chat access today.
And also, please give me your first and last name. Thanks.
We all know that you're a celebrity inside. I know I introduced myself as Allison. I'll just call people on the phone. Hey, it's Allison. I expect you to know what Allison it is and where I am from. So, don't be like me, do a better job. So we're going to talk about the actual legal statute for the equal access rule that HUD has. So basically, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or marital status, everyone has equal right to enter shelter and to receive shelter and to enter any of our HUD-funded programs. So this is HUD wanting us to make sure that everyone in our entire system is really aware that this is a priority. I'm the person who takes the phone calls when you have someone come through your door who, their identity is different than your single gender shelter, or they don't feel safe. I'm the person who usually gets that call, and then I work in partnership with Miguel at DSS to help find a safe place for that person if they are not feeling safe, or you do not feel safe having them there. If you're feeling that it creates a vulnerability for them. So please keep doing that. So the basis for this training was our new HUD Secretary, Marcia L. Fudge, sent out a letter on April 22nd, 2021. And in it, she said, all individuals, regardless of sexual orientation or gender identity, have equal access to all HUD-funded programs, shelters, buildings, and facilities, as well as benefits, services, and accommodations. So in order to continue to be HUD funded, we have to come through and make all of this true, if it isn't already true. I know that the vast majority of the providers I've dealt with in this system have been absolutely wonderful, and I would give you all A+. But we do have some weak points, and I just want to make sure that everyone feels more called in by that than called out by that. I want to call you in so that we can all do better together. I don't want to call you out and tell you you're doing things wrong. So that's not our purpose today. So back in 2020, they tried to change the equal access rule in our previous presidential administration, and that would have allowed programs and their operators to subject people to their opinion of their gender, their orientation, and their marital status. You know, in our family shelters, there doesn't have to be a marriage certificate to make a family. And that, you know, still applies. So that proposed change in 2020 that really scared a lot of people, and made people afraid that if they approached a shelter provider or housing provider, that they would be discriminated against, that's been withdrawn. So the 2016 version of the rule is the one that we need to adhere to. So all part of our providing equal access to everyone. As always, I have included where did I get this from on the bottom of the slides, and these slides will be available to you folks online and as part of this training. So that concludes the news from me, that this is something that's, you know, not optional, and a way that we need to level up within our CoC. And if you have any questions, reservations, you want to practice pronouns, whatever it is you want to do, you know, just let me know. I know for me, I use gender neutral pronouns when I don't know someone or what their pronouns are. I have found it has the added benefit of protecting confidentiality when you're talking about clients, because if you refer to them with gender neutral pronouns, you've just expanded the pool of people that you might be referring to. So that can be a protective factor as well. I myself, you know, I don't see those Zer, them pronouns very often. I don't know if many of us will, but we should definitely, you know, take to heart when someone tells us what their identity is and how they prefer to be referred to. So I am going to stop sharing, and we're actually going to stop broadcasting to YouTube and recording so that